how the heck can I use this intro to show off all the new filmmaking features on the iPhone 13 Pro Max? Yo, 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 it's Joe from Photos with Phones. Before we talk about the new cinematic and macro mode, or the larger sensors, or the improved chip, or literally any of the other impressive stuff about the iPhone 13 Pro Max, I'm gonna unbox the phone so that you can see what your purchase comes with. So, you're interested in the 13 Pro Max for mobile filmmaking? Well, I just spent a week in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where I put this baby through the ringer, comparing it to my trusty iPhone 11 Pro. Why'd I choose the iPhone 11 Pro?
Wireless carriers, at least in the US. I don't know how it works outside of the US. But they lock you in on a 2-year contract. So the plan is that you pay off the phone in 2 years. So if you are looking into buying a iPhone 13 Pro Max, the biggest chance is that you bought your last phone 2 years ago, and 2 years ago the top of the line phone for you would have been an iPhone 11. I went with the Pro model instead of the Pro Max model because I figured it was a good opportunity to see whether or not upgrading from the base Pro to the Pro Max model was worth it. Typically Apple packs just a little bit of extra sauce into the Pro Max model. So I just figure you can see whether or not it's time for you to upgrade your iPhone to the newest model, and then to take it one step further, whether or not you should go with the Pro or the Pro Max.
In this video, you'll see sample footage from each camera, examples of each frame rate, audio tests, zoom tests, and lots of discussion of those new features like cinematic mode, macro mode, ProRes video, and more. To set up all this discussion though, here's how the 13 Pro Max compares to the 11 Pro. Now, the 11 Pro is 2 years older, but on the technical side of things, it's pretty similar. But there are 3 main differences. Oh, here she comes. This is my dog Jasmine. She's made appearances in other videos if you're a long-time subscriber. How you doing, baby? Hey, can you go lay down, baby? Oh, great. Couldn't have worked out better. Difference number 1 is that they have... Hello. Jazzy, I got you working. Difference number 1 is in the optical zoom. The 13 Pro Max has a 3x optical zoom, whereas the 11 Pro has a 2x optical zoom. The 13 Pro Max also has much larger sensors in the camera, which allows for much better low light performance. And difference number 3, the 13 Pro Max introduces drastically improved software across the board thanks to Apple's new chipset. What does all this mean in terms of performance for mobile filmmaking now? Well, you be the judge. So this little montage should have shown you that no matter how impressive the iPhone 11 Pro is, and it is pretty impressive, I use it in client videos all the time. It's just not as impressive as the 13 Pro Max. Now, I'm going to go through all the different video modes and settings and discuss what each does and how I use them. If you're looking for something in particular, utilize the chapters linked right down there. The straight up video mode. In the top left corner, you'll see your options for frame rates. I talked about frame rates and resolutions while in Chapel Hill for the larger and complete iPhone 13 Pro Max camera review. Here's some of that discussion and then some examples.
On the iPhone 13s, you're going to be able to shoot in 24, 30, 60, 120, and 240 frames per second. What does all that mean now? 24 frames per second is going to be the most cinematic looking frame rate. 24 frames per second is what they mostly use for movies, TV shows. Most people on YouTube shooting 24 frames per second. It's like the standard frame rate. Do note that outside of the United States, people shoot in 25 frames per second, not 24 frames per second. It's really just like, they were like, well, we use the metric system, so we might as well use different frame rate too. 30 frames per second is, as far as I'm concerned, the least usable frame rate. 30 frames per second does not look as cinematic as 24 frames per second, and it's not enough frames per second to be slow-mo at all. 60 frames per second, on the other hand, can be either normal speed video or you can slow it down to slow-mo. Do note that 60 frames per second is going to take up a lot of storage, especially if you're shooting it in 4K. 60 frames per second tends to have its own kind of look. It looks kind of dreamlike. Everything's very, very smooth because there's extra frames in there. I don't love the way 60 frames per second looks. I shoot the majority of my stuff in 24 frames per second or 120 frames per second. So resolution is really just like how crisp the video is. It has to do with how many pixels are being captured.
I've noticed no reason to use ProRes. I'm going to do some color adjusting in Final Cut, and I'll record that on my Mac, like screen record that on my Mac, so that you can see that. That's the only thing that I can think of that makes that file format preferable. I was not happy with it. It takes up massive amounts of storage, and it's caused issues with playback in Final Cut, like skipping frames and like dropping the music, and it's been really, really, really annoying. I did a comparison when I did the zoom test while I was playing golf in Chapel Hill. I did one video doing all of the digital zoom with ProRes on, and then one digital zoom test with ProRes off. I wondered if maybe that made it better. I don't know. Yeah, I don't like the ProRes, not a fan of the ProRes. I think that the feature is really, really cool, and I'm excited that Apple has introduced it into a regular iPhone. Like, you don't need any external gear or anything like that. I think that just makes mobile filmmaking more accessible to more people. I just don't like the fact that I don't have control over when the macro mode turns on. And there is an option in the settings to turn on the control of the macro mode. And I will show you in the screen capture right here that I turn it on. And I've never been given the option to switch into macro mode. I don't like all of the software dependency in smartphone filmmaking and photography for that matter. The macro mode, you're supposed to be able to do it in slow-mo. I couldn't get it to work in slow-mo. Yeah, I think the macro mode is cool. I wish you had more control. That pretty much sums up macro mode. So we're gonna have some brief chronological issues because I am going to shoot the intro for this video right after I'm finished recording this audio stuff. And when I shot everything in Chapel Hill, I got lots of great cinematic mode stuff, but because I was shooting every day, I wanted to have as much storage as I needed, so I was taking everything off of my iPhone every day and putting it on my external hard drive. So I expected to be able to get it back on the iPhone and adjust that cinematic focus point, whatever it is you want to call it, and you couldn't. Retrospectively, that makes sense, and I feel a little bit like an idiot, but I am going to record some cinematic stuff for the intro that you've already seen. So I'll put some of that on the screen right now. Alright, so I am adjusting the focus point using the keyframing in the cinematic mode, editing interface, whatever you want to call it, on the 13 Pro Max. Honestly, after trying to mess with this for a little while, I think it's best to just do the shot a couple of times and realize that the software is a little finicky as far as post is concerned, but it does do a good job, and if you give it a couple chances, the results are going to be good. So I'm just going to kind of stop that. I do want to do some adjusting of this aperture. So the way aperture works with traditional cameras is the lower the aperture, the more blurred the background. The higher the aperture, the less blurred the background. So f16 means everything is in focus, and f2 means everything in the background and the foreground that's not in that like plane of focus is going to be out of focus. For this shot, I like it with as much bokeh as I can get. So that's what I'm going with there.
$120 frames per second and 240 frames per second are going to be very standard slow motion.
For slow-mo, here's how and why. You can change the speed ramp in the slow-mo of your iPhone. So, you adjust where the slow-mo starts here. So I'm gonna take it to right before it starts to turn, right where that happens. And within a video, that can look kind of cool.
Generally speaking though, the 120 frames per second is going to be 1/4 speed, and the 240 frames per second is going to be 1/8 speed. Both are plenty slow, but just if you were looking for some sort of quantitative information, there it is.
I love time lapses, but I don't love the time lapse feature in the native camera app. Here's why.
So when I am using time lapses in my YouTube videos, typically what I'm doing is shooting in 24 frames per second, 4K for like 5 minutes, and then making a time lapse in Final Cut. That really just means that I'm speeding it up like 4,000% or something like that. And you may say, Joe, your phone, whether you're shooting on your Pixel 4a with 5G or any of your iPhones, it has a time-lapse mode, bud. And to that, I would say, yes, it does, but Moment hooked photos with phones up with some free lessons. So Moment sells lessons from popular creators, and one of the lessons that I did was a mobile filmmaking lesson from Andy To. If you don't know who Andy To is, it's dope. It's so cool. His videos get shown at like the Apple release events and all that kind of stuff. And so if Andy To tells me that I should, instead of using the time-lapse feature, shoot a longer video and then turn it into a time-lapse myself, that's what I'm gonna do. Did this morning, my alarm went off at like 4:50 so that I could get out the door and all that kind of stuff. Somehow I misplaced the dongle, like the lightning adapter dongle that I need to attach my my Rode microphone to the iPhone. Alrighty, so this is what the native audio from the iPhone 13 Pro Max is going to sound like. There's a generator that kicked on right over there that I'm going to assume that you can hear. For the most part, the situation audio-wise right now is the same as it was with the iPhone 11 Pro, so that'll be a good comparison. So we're going to compare right now with a little while ago.
Now, at the beginning of this trip, I set my settings with the idea being that I would adjust them live during this stage of the process to reflect my experience poring over the footage. Just knowing what I know, you're gonna wanna stick around for this. I'll go ahead and screen record the whole process. I'll put it right over here in 3, 2, 1, go. To get to the settings, you click on the settings and then you scroll down until you get to the camera. The formats, the cinematic video and 4K at 60 frames per second require high efficiency, so that's what you go with. I'm actually gonna turn off the ProRes. I like the Pro Raw. That's a photography thing. If you're interested in iPhone photography, I'm going to make a very similar video to this, but for photography. And if you want to see that, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you. I don't want to turn the setting on for 4K 60 because that takes up a lot of storage, and I don't want all of my stuff to be shot at 4K 60. PAL formats I'm not worried about. HDR, high dynamic range video. Definitely want to take advantage of that 10-bit color. One of the differences between the 11 Pro and the 13 Pro Max is the 11 Pro is still using 8-bit color, whereas the 13 Pro Max is using that 10-bit color with the dynamic range to just do a better job of presenting color as naturally as we as human beings see it. I actually read this thing from Apple about what this new color, I'll put Apple's words down here because I want to do it justice. So definitely want to take advantage of the paper mentioned, both the 10-bit color and the Dolby Vision, so we're going with that. Auto-FPS automatically reduce the frame rate to improve low light and optimize. No. So generally the way that exposure works, and I just want to shoot in 24 frames per second when it's dark because I have the best chance of seeing the most stuff. Lock camera, do not automatically switch. Yeah, this is on, but I probably have screen recorded somewhere an example of the camera switching while I'm shooting something, and that is so annoying. And the 13 Pro Max does it all the time, especially with Moment lenses on. It is the freaking worst. Slo-Mo. I like it in 120 frames per second. Maybe the new iPhone 14 will introduce some 4K Slo-Mo, we'll see. Stereo sound I want. Comment your thoughts about the audio test. I think if you are looking to get into mobile filmmaking or making a YouTube channel or whatever it might be, the first piece of gear that you should look into is a microphone. Improving the audio is the biggest thing. Always have your grid mode on, absolutely a must, just in terms of keeping things level, keeping things rule of thirds, all that kind of fun stuff. So now the macro control button is off. I swear I had it on when I started, and I'm pretty sure if I check, I have it on multiple times. So definitely want that on. Well, I guess that's all of it. And that's all we got for you. If you feel like you got value from this video, please hit the like button. It really helps photos of phones out a lot because it forces YouTube to show our videos to other people. Because of the algorithm. Comment your thoughts about Apple's most interesting offering for iPhone filmmaking probably ever. And as always, subscribe to the channel and turn on that notification bell. We're coming out with videos about mobile photography and filmmaking, tips, tricks, hacks, reviews, unboxings, literally anything that you could want to know if you like taking photos and videos on your phone. Toodles. See you in the next one. Bye.